Good morning. Yes, my name is Sally Kettle, and I have rowed across the Atlantic Ocean not once but twice. Were you expecting a Russian shot putter? Right? And I consider myself to be a hero too, but not for the thing that I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. So how would you expect somebody like me, who comes from the Midlands, from Northampton, which is about as far away from the Atlantic Ocean, from any sea, to decide to row across the Atlantic Ocean, having never stepped on a boat before and being very, very seasick when I did, on a cross-channel ferry from Dover to Calais. How did I decide to do it? Well, I had a boyfriend. And ladies and gentlemen, he is now an ex-boyfriend. And for good reason. He and I had a very tempestuous relationship, and one night in bed he said, I said to him, I would like to do Land's End to John O'Groats, please. I'd done the London Marathon and I wanted to do the next big thing. And he said, no, you can't go. I'm planning a trip with my best friend. It's boys only and girls are not allowed. And ladies, I threw a strop. And he said, let's row across the Atlantic instead. Is that the first thing you'd be thinking? It wasn't what I was imagining. So the next day I went onto the internet to find out if people do actually row oceans, and to my horror I find out if there's something bloody stupid to do, the Brits are the first to do it. There was a chap called Shea Blythe who rowed across the Atlantic in 1966, and he organised ocean rowing races after that. So I thought, first, I needed to be a man, because only men row oceans. And second, I thought I needed to be a rower, because only rowers row oceans. And then I thought, as I didn't pass any of those tests, I'd need to get on a treadmill with a peg on my nose and a hose in my mouth and pass lots of medical examinations. And to my horror, when I called them up, I said, I don't pass any of these kind of, rowing things. They said, as long as you pay the money, you're in the race. So that's how I entered an ocean rowing race to row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean with my boyfriend. I was having a bit of a midlife crisis, I have to admit. I was in my 20s, and I just finished a theatre degree. Can you tell? Jazz hands, right? And I kind of wanted to have a life that was slightly different, more unusual, exciting. I wanted kind of like a better boyfriend. I wanted a better job, and I wanted to be kind of the hero of my own story. And that was the driving force for deciding to take on this ocean row. But it all kind of went slightly askew. We managed to get to the start of the race, my boyfriend and I, but he has epilepsy, and unfortunately, when we started rowing, he had an epileptic seizure, and it was 6 days out. We'd spent a year and a half preparing for this monumental and exciting adventure, and it was all going downhill, and we decided we'd have to come back to the very start of the race again and disqualify ourselves from the journey. And I'd spent a year and a half with him preparing for this monumental experience. We learnt to row, we did astronavigation, we did first aid, sea survival, all those things. And here we were on our ocean rowing boat, and it was all going a bit downhill. But I was determined that this boat would not kind of flounder, that I would get it across the Atlantic Ocean. So I decided to invite somebody who'd come with me, and she proved to be the hero of that story. So here I am, rowing away. I'm not naked, and ocean rowers do go naked, but I thought maybe that would be a bit much for you guys. The hero of this particular hour was going to be my mum. I phoned her up and I said, Mum, it's all going wrong. Will you come with me? And she said, yes. And I said, good. Meet me in the harbour and bring more tea bags. My mum was coming with me on an ocean rowing boat to row across the Atlantic Ocean, having never rowed before, and she's a gardener from Northampton, and that's her. That's Sarah, my mum. We had 2 months to prepare for our Atlantic adventure. And I taught her to row, which was really great. She did her astronavigation and her sea survival and her first aid. And we got into a rowing boat that's 23 foot long by 6 foot wide. And you have to build it yourself. It comes flat pack and you glue it together. I mean, it just sounds so utterly crazy, doesn't it? This mother and daughter in a rowing boat, 3,000 miles of open ocean. But you know what? We bloody well did it. It took us 4 months to row across the Atlantic Ocean, right? There was a chap in his 60s who rowed across a month quicker than we did, right? And he was rowing on his own. It made no sense. But you know what? We decided we wanted to get across and we wanted to have a good time. And that's what we did. And sometimes it was a bit crap. I know our backsides really hurt. We complained a lot. We had a phrase on our boat called "no hope on the boat," and it sounds so demoralizing. But at one point, we were going in the wrong direction, and we were rowing towards Florida, and we were supposed to be going towards Barbados. And I was going, oh, God, I hope it gets better. I hope the wind gets better. I hope the rain gets better. And my mum said, stop. Stop hoping all the time. She hit me around the face with a wet flying fish. Right? And they died on our decks in their hundreds, right? I woke up one morning to 90 dead flying fish, from a tiny sprat to a big thing that got stuck in my mum's knickers. I mean, it was just, it was the cycle of life out there. And she said, stop hoping all the time. In this situation, it doesn't help. So we had this phrase, no hope on the boat. And the reason was, she explained, was because sometimes hope is expecting other things and other people to get involved to kind of get you out of a situation. It's not taking control of the stuff that you can control. So that's what we did. We stopped hoping. And we did what we could do, which was clean the boat if we were going in the wrong direction and we had to wait it out, or row. And it took us a few more days to wait for this weather to turn. And we zoomed 2.5 knots, and I'll demonstrate 2.5 knots to you. Okay, we could have walked across the Atlantic Ocean quicker. And we arrived in Barbados. And it was the most incredible experience. And it took us quite a while to row around the north point of Barbados, and it was in the dark. And because we'd spent 4 months at sea, the only thing I'd smelt for the last 4 months was my mum. And suddenly I could smell this greenness of land and good food, because we'd lived on dehydrated kind of army rations for 4 months. The only person I'd heard for the last 4 months was my mum. And suddenly we heard cicadas and people eating nice dinner. And I remember I'd wished every single day away on that trip. Every single day I didn't want to be there. Every single day I wanted to be home. I had dreams so vivid that I woke up in the morning and went, oh my God, I'm still on the boat. And we got to the end, and it was over like that. In a flash, 4 months, it's just a dot in a lifetime. And I promised myself I would never do that again. I'd never wish my time away. And my mum and I got off the boat, and we'd been joking that, maybe we'd get a Guinness World Record for being the slowest ocean rowers in the world, right? And actually, we didn't, because people take longer than us. Who would have thought it, right? But my mum and I actually did make it into the Guinness Book of Records as the first mother and daughter to row any ocean, right? Pretty cool, right? And it's an extraordinary thing for me to be able to talk about this right now, because I've just had a baby. She's 9 months old. And I say to lots of people, sometimes you only really get to know your parents when you've had a child. I got to know my mum in an ocean rowing boat, and it took us 4 months to get there. And you can't change that. You just can't imagine how that experience is. And it really, really changed me, and it enabled me to become the person I am today. So it was a very brave decision, I thought, but not necessarily a very heroic one. But I'm standing here because of that culmination of different decisions that have led me to do lots of things, from volunteering to be a humanitarian aid worker, to climbing up the Pyrenees with ladies from the armed forces, which was the most exciting adventure I've ever been on, because I'm actually very scared of heights, and I cried at the top. And I sailed across the North Atlantic, and I've been to some of the most remote places on Earth. And this is all because I made those brave decisions. And I've done a bit of documentary stuff. I mean, it's all great, and I'm telling you all these things. You're thinking, yeah, whatever. I tried to row around Great Britain. We got rescued at Margate. We started at the Tower Bridge, so it wasn't very long. And I have also had the experience of eating grubs. They were very nice. They taste a bit like marshmallows with a chewy bottom. But when I was invited to come and do this talk today, I was kind of thinking, are any of these experiences heroic? And yeah, in a way they are. And I was able to raise a lot of money for a lot of charities. But I kind of started looking at my experiences in total and thinking, which one can I tell you, which would be the most resonating, I suppose. And actually, funnily enough, it was none of these things. And it happened before I actually rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, I was training to row, and I'd promised myself at the gym that I would sit on the rowing machine and do 2 hours on, 2 hours off to give me that experience of being an ocean rowing boat, because that's what you do. You row for 2 hours, and then you rest for 2 hours, and then you row for 2 hours, and then you rest for 2 hours. And so I was planning to do that. So I was on my rowing machine, watching a bit of telly, and within 20 minutes I was feeling pretty bored. So I got off the rowing machine, as you do. Has anybody actually rowed on a rowing machine? 20 minutes is pretty hardcore, right? So I stepped off and thought, you know what I'll do? What other ocean rowers can do when they're out in the rowing boat is jump into the sea and have a swim. So I went out to the swimming pool in my cosy, and it was a sunny day. And there was loads of people. And there was a body in the pool, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. This little girl floating face down in the pool, and it took me ages to kind of understand what was going on. And I eventually called for some women to help pull this little girl out. It's making me feel quite emotional actually talking about it, but pull this girl out of the pool. And she was blue and floppy. And I'd done my first aid course, and I said, give her to me. And I gave her 3 breaths. And afterwards, I felt guilty. It was the weirdest thing, because I thought, I had this training, but maybe I shouldn't have done it. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be me. And I also thought, oh my God, I didn't check her mouth, because at the time you were supposed to kind of put your finger in the mouth and test to see if there's actually something in there. And so I stuck my finger in her mouth, and she bit me. She bloody bit me. But she'd started breathing. And I passed her over to the lifeguard and said, you better have her now. Not because she was breathing, but because I felt like a fraud. I shouldn't have done it. But I did it, and she's alive because of my actions, right? 140,000 people die every year who could be saved by first aid. Even if it's half of that number, that's still a lot of people, right? And I thought, am I the hero for rowing an ocean? No, I'm a hero because I did a first aid course. Because 386 people die every day. I didn't know that St. John Ambulance would be here today, but they're going to do a course this afternoon, and I really, really, really ask you to go and do that course, because this is a practical tip. You don't have to row oceans, you don't have to climb mountains. If you want to be a hero that makes a massive difference, go and do a first aid course. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope this has given you some inspiration for this afternoon. Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.